Today is the first time on this channel we're breaking down not a Primarch, not an Eldar, and not some freakishly big Git, but a sword, and not just any sword, the legendary Black Sword of Sigismund. And let me tell you right now, this will not be the last time we do this. Because once you jump down this specific cow hole, you realize just how absurd the weapon roster in 40K actually is. You have the Emperor's Sword, the Silent King's Scepter, and hell, half the Primarch's arsenal is straight up broken. So let me know down in the comments which weapon you want to see next, and perhaps your cow overlord will oblige. But we're starting with Sigismund's sword from the Siege of Terra, a blade that is easily one of the most mysterious and confusing weapons in all of 40K. We're going to break down what the Black Sword is, what we actually know about it, then we'll go over some theories about what the Black Sword may have done to Sigismund, and why it made him so goddamn unstoppable. And finally, we'll scale it against the rest of the weapons in the 40K universe to see where it truly stands. So say it with me, fellas, it's time to power scale. The Black Sword was among the many weapons created by the Emperor himself, forged in Terra's ancient past. For most of its existence, it was hidden away in Malcador the Sigillite's private armory, sealed alongside other ancient relics of unknown power and quality. It remained there until the Horus Heresy reached its final catastrophic phase, the Siege of Terra, where it was finally given to Sigismund, and from that moment onward, it became the weapon he wielded throughout the remainder of the siege. With the Black Sword in hand, Sigismund cuts down an absurd number of traitor champions. Exalted lords of the Sons of Horus, Plague Marines of the Death Guard, Sorcerers of the 1,000 Suns, Berserkers of the World Eaters, Duelists of the Emperor's Children, Terminators of the Iron Warriors, Chaplains of the Word Bearers, and truly a countless number of demons. And remember folks, these were not ordinary Space Marines. Every one of these warriors was greatly enhanced. Their strength, speed, and durability pushed far beyond baseline Astartes limits through Chaos Blessings, Warp Exposure, and direct patronage from the Dark Gods. Chief among those slain were champions like Karn the Betrayer, Chosen of Khorne, and Indras Arcada of the Sons of Horus, who were both elite combatants even by Legion standards. Much later, Sigismund would wield this same blade against Abaddon the Despoiler. Despite his advanced age, he held his own for a significant amount of time, and Iskandar Kaon even said that age had indeed slowed down the Black Knight, but only enough to bring him down to everyone else's level.
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
Oh my god, what a guy. But folks, we are not here to power scale Sigismund, we are here to power scale his sword. Let me get back on topic before I get a little too deep in the cow hole. So naturally, the next question we need to ask is, what is so special about the Black Sword? The Black Sword first appears in the book Warhawk, and notably, it is never given a clean, technical explanation of what the blade actually is. Instead, its significance is conveyed through atmosphere, implication, and Sigismund's reaction. The moment Sigismund lays eyes on the blade, something happens to him. A faint shiver passed through his body. He almost thought he heard something emanate from it. A faint murmuring, unquiet, and veiled. This reaction occurs before he even touches the sword. Sigismund then describes it as the perfect blade, a weapon of excess and extremity. He has to actively resist the urge to seize it, as though the blade is exerting a pull of its own. And crucially, this weapon is not merely sanctioned by the Emperor, it was directly made by him. When Sigismund finally draws the blade, he enters a weird state. As if in some kind of trance, almost without meaning to, Sigismund did so. As he grasped the hilt, a shiver ran up his arm. The metal was as black as jet. He lifted his face and saw nothing. The surface drank in light, giving nothing back. It was selfish, this thing. Heavy, far heavier than any sword he had borne before, but something told him it wouldn't slow him down. Its weight was just another aspect of its savage nature. The murmuring carried on, just beyond the edge of hearing. It might have been his imagination. It wasn't his imagination. And unfortunately for me and everyone else watching this video, this is the only detailed description we ever receive of the Black Sword. And that is important because after this, for the remainder of the Siege of Terra and the book Black Legion, where Sigismund appears yet again, the Black Sword is never truly described. It is not clearly labeled as a warp-forged, psychic, or anti-chaos weapon. What we are given, though, are hints on what it might possibly be. For example, Hassan, one of Malcador's chosen, who presents the blade to Sigismund in the first place, remarks, "Many ancient things are guarded in my master's chambers." To which Sigismund replies, "No, you do not understand me. When we went into the void preaching the end of magic, this thing was already here. It had already been made by him. What does that tell you?" Hassan refuses to speculate, but it's hard not to miss that the Emperor not only created the Black Sword, he had planned for its use. It existed before the heresy, before the need for it was obvious, waiting for the precise moment and wielder it was meant to serve. But still, it does not exactly help us solve our problem of figuring out what it is and how it changed Sigismund. Before we get straight into theory mode, let's lay out the facts first. We definitely know that the Black Sword gave some form of amp or buff to Sigismund based on the evidence that prior to the Black Sword, he lost to Karn in the book The First Wall, and then after receiving the Black Sword in Warhawk, he was able to kill the Champion of Khorne. Remember folks, this is Karn the Betrayer, chosen of Khorne, a warrior whose physical abilities were vastly elevated, meaning it would be almost impossible for a baseline Astartes, even those like Sigismund, to defeat this version of Karn, which implies that the Black Blade greatly enhanced Sigismund to reach Karn's level or exceed him. It's also stated that the sword does not seem to affect Sigismund physically, despite being heavier than any weapon he has ever wielded. The weight is undeniable, but it never slows him down. That alone suggests that there is something deeply unnatural at work here. Some supernatural mechanism that allows the blade to bypass normal physical limitations, whether by altering how its mass is perceived, empowering its wielder, or both simultaneously. To add to that, the brief passage from Warhawk when Sigismund receives the blade strongly suggests that the Emperor created the sword specifically for Sigismund, possibly as a final contingency, a failsafe, and a weapon forged in advance in case the Imperium ever needed a champion to stand when everything else failed. That's all we truly know about it, to be honest, and thus your favorite fallen Gao has to fill in the gaps with some wonderful theories. So now it's time to enter theory mode and discuss what the Black Sword actually did to Sigismund. Before we jump into these theories, we first need to establish one crucial distinction. The Black Sword is not the same as the swords later wielded by the Emperor's champions of the Black Templar chapter. The swords wielded by the Emperor's champions are mostly just exceptionally crafted power swords made extraordinary by the faith and devotion of the warrior who wields them. Sigismund's Black Sword, on the other hand, is quite different. As we discussed earlier, the blade is clearly making the user stronger than ordinary. So strong in fact that they are able to stand up against the strongest of the traitor legions. Sigismund's sword in the current setting rests within the Temple of Dorn aboard the Eternal Crusader, and its current wielder is unknown. None of the present Emperor's champions bear Sigismund's blade. Instead, they wield other black swords that function primarily as faith-enhanced weapons. Those other black swords respond to belief. They become deadlier as the champion's conviction intensifies, acting as conduits for faith rather than sources of power themselves. So with that separation firmly established, let's talk about some theories on what the Black Sword can actually do. My first theory is that the Black Sword is a null weapon, specifically forged with black stone. For those who don't know what black stone is, it is a mysterious warp manipulating substance that is highly resistant to the powers of the warp, known to hold back its energies, limiting both psychic abilities and the manifestation of demons. and there are several reasons that this theory might be correct. First, the blade is described as drinking in all light and producing murmurs just beyond the edge of hearing. That description closely aligns with how Blackstone and other null materials are often portrayed in the 40K setting, particularly in their ability to absorb, dampen, or distort warp phenomena rather than merely block them. Additionally, during Sigismund's duel with Karn experiences a sensation of emptiness and hollowness that does not belong to him. For the Chosen of Khorne, a warrior whose every breath is fueled by warp-born rage and divine blessing, this reaction is fundamentally abnormal. Karn should be overflowing with power, bloodlust, and fury. Instead, he feels a void. That strongly implies the source of this sensation is not psychological, but external, and possibly emanating directly from Sigismund himself.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
This suggests that the Black Sword was doing far more than simply empowering its wielder. It may have been actively disrupting the warp in its immediate vicinity. If the blade dampened, distorted, or partially nullified warp energies, then Karn's connection to Khorne and the warp in general would have been weakened during his fight with Sigismund. Even a brief suppression of that link would dramatically reduce his enhanced strength, speed, and durability, bringing him back down to his base level, while Sigismund, wielding the Black Sword, was simultaneously being elevated beyond his own base state. Under this interpretation, the Black Sword functions as a localized warp-draining weapon, actively weakening chaos-enhanced enemies simply by being brought into combat range. The main weakness of this theory is that it lacks explicit confirmation within the text. If Sigismund was actively projecting a null field, one might expect the text to state this more clearly. Instead, we are left with implication rather than direct description. As compelling as this theory is, we just don't have explicit confirmation, making it very difficult to declare it the definitive answer. The second theory I have is the Black Sword is essentially an enhanced, hyper-empowered version of the standard Black Swords wielded by the Emperor's champions, and that it amplifies the abilities of its wielders through their faith. Unlike ordinary Black Swords, which function primarily as conduits for devotion, in this theory, Sigismund's blade takes that principle to the extreme. At this point in the Siege of Terra, Sigismund has fully accepted the Emperor as a god and truly believes himself to be the Emperor's chosen champion. That absolute conviction could have allowed him to channel his faith into the weapon to an unprecedented degree, effectively supercharging both himself and the blade. With this surge of devotion, Sigismund may have elevated his strength, speed, and reflexes to levels sufficient to match or even surpass Chaos champions like Karn the Betrayer, who were physically and spiritually empowered by their dark patrons. In this theory, the Black Sword turns the wielder's belief into a tangible, combative force, making faith itself a weapon. Chris Wright's writing supports this interpretation. Once he sinks into this faith's embrace, he becomes simultaneously superlative and ghastly. He is the 40K Imperium, fixated on crushing his enemies with no thought as to why or what victory over them might achieve or look like. Only that it has to be done. No pity indeed, and certainly no remorse. So it is that we get to the purity of 40K's endless war, in which both sides are equally nihilistic and we see the terrible bargain that humanity is forced to make. You can survive in a fashion, but only if you pledge allegiance to one of the two horrific powers, the gods of the warp or the corpse on the throne. No alternative, no escape, no happy ending.
Well, this sucks.
This quote from the GOAT author Chris Wright supports that the Black Sword functions as a catalyst for Sigismund's transformation, fusing his absolute faith with the power of the blade. The only problem with the faith amp theory is that the description of the Black Sword does not exactly support this hypothetical power-up, and yet again, it's never clearly stated that the sword has this effect, thus leaving it as another hypothetical explanation. God damn it, Games Workshop, you son of a gun.
Oh, I hate you.
And my third and final theory is that the Black Sword imbues Sigismund with a fragment of the Emperor's own psychic power. When Sigismund first draws the blade, he enters a trance-like state, almost as if the weapon itself is guiding his movements. This could indicate that the Emperor intentionally baked a portion of his power into the weapon, transforming it into a kind of psychic conduit that amplifies both the wielder and the blade itself. Unlike ordinary power swords or faith-enhanced relics, the Black Sword may directly transfer some measure of the Emperor's own might to Sigismund, allowing him to perform feats that would otherwise be impossible for even the most elite Space Marines. Several elements support this idea. First, the Black Sword was created long before the Horus Heresy, and even before the Great Crusade, implying that the Emperor had foreseen both the events of Terra and the role Sigismund would play. That level of foresight suggests the blade was designed for a specific purpose: to empower the Emperor's chosen champion at a critical moment. Second, the trance-like experience Sigismund undergoes upon drawing it is consistent with psychic or divine artifacts in the 40K universe, which often enhance the wielder by channeling an external source of immense power. Finally, the sheer effectiveness of the blade against Chaos Champions, enemies who are themselves empowered by their patrons, hints at a source beyond ordinary craftsmanship. But if we're playing devil's advocate, the idea that the Black Sword of Sigismund contains a fragment of the Emperor's own power also has problems. The Emperor was notoriously reluctant to share his power directly, and weapons that were known to channel his power, like the Emperor's sword, produce an unmistakable divine effect, like burning demons from existence and scarring the warp itself. The Black Sword, while definitely powerful, lacks these overt signatures, implying that if the Emperor's power is involved, it is indirect, constrained, or filtered, rather than a true fragment of his might. So those are all your favorite Fallen Cows theories on the Black Sword of Sigismund. Which one do you guys think is correct? I am in the personal opinion that it is a Blackstone sword. It's the only one that remotely makes sense. The whispering, the all-black nature of the sword, and his ability to cut through warp-empowered champions like butter all support the theory that Sigismund's Black Sword is a null weapon. And that brings us to the final part of this video. Just how powerful is the Black Sword compared to the rest of the weapons in the 40K universe? Between potentially nullifying the warp, amplifying faith to godlike extremes, and channeling a fraction of the Emperor's might, this weapon is quite powerful. And whatever its true power is, while wielding it, Sigismund was truly a beast at killing enhanced Chaos Champions and demons. To truly understand the blade's power, we need to compare it side by side with other legendary weapons, from Primarch relics to the Emperor's own arsenal, and see just where Sigismund's Black Sword sits at the pinnacle of 40K weapons. As you all know, my beloved herd, when I power scale things on this channel, I like to compare them to other things from across the 40K universe. So, of course, we're bringing out a Cow's Power Pyramid to help us figure out exactly where the Black Sword lands. This time, we're only using 4 tiers: Enhanced, Above Empowered, Primarch Level, and Universal. The weapons in Enhanced tier are exceptionally crafted or devotion augmented, powerful enough to take down Chaos Champions with relative ease. Swarmlord Swords and the Apollonian Spear belong in this tier. Above Empowered includes weapons that go beyond simple enhancement, capable of injuring or killing powerful enemies like greater demons. The Sword of Silent Screams, the Sword of Sorrow, or the Axe of Mordecai belong in this tier. Primarch level weapons match or surpass the combat capabilities of the Primarchs. They can shift the outcome of major battles and directly challenge galaxy-altering forces. Weapons like the Talon of Horus and the Spear of Telesto belong in this tier. And finally, we come to the Universal tier. The weapons found here are able to affect reality and the very balance of the universe. These weapons are divine, story-altering artifacts that operate on a cosmic scale. Weapons like Drachnia, the Emperor's Sword, or the Scepter of Eternal Glory belong in the Universal tier. So to be honest, when we look at the Black Sword compared to the rest of these weapons, the scaling becomes pretty straightforward, fellas. It is definitely not universal tier. It doesn't devour souls like Drachnia, it doesn't one-shot a Warlord Titan like the Scepter of Eternal Glory, and it definitely can't burn Nurgle's Garden like the Emperor's Sword. It also doesn't quite reach Primarch level, because it lacks the feats of the Talon of Horus, which killed 2 Primarchs and mortally wounded the Emperor, and it definitely does not hold a candle to the Spear of Telesto, which vaporized one of Demon Primarch Angron's arms. So that leaves us with the enhanced or above empowered weapon tiers. Based on what we know, the Black Sword allows Sigismund to cut down Chaos Champions like Karn and Indris, and enhance Sigismund way beyond his base state. But I don't know, fellas, if it compares to the weapons like the Axe of Mordecai, which was able to break Magnus the Red's wards, which were impervious to every weapon in the Imperium during the Siege of Fenris, as well as the Swords of Silence and Sorrow, which are able to drain the health from enemies and turn them to ash. So Herd, I feel like the Black Sword sadly sits in the enhanced tier. Most likely at the top though, over a Swarmlord Sword and the Apollonian Spear. Although it made Sigismund a terror on the battlefield, capable of feats most mortals and even enhanced Space Marines could only dream of, it's still grounded enough that it truly does not threaten reality or powerful beings like the Primarchs. You can argue with me all day, fellas, but this is coming from a Sigismund fan. All we really know is that it either drained the warp from his enemies or potentially buffed him to a slight degree. It definitely does not compare to the other weapons in 40k. And that's going to do it for this video, Herd. If you enjoyed my first foray into power scaling 40k weapons, like this video and make sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment below on which weapon you want to see analyzed next. Shout out my Patreon and YouTube members: Ritter S, Impossible Paul, Keydri, Jack Mentel, Musty, Nico149, Omar, Chris, and Soap Tastes Okay. Happy holidays from your favorite gal. As always, Herd, stay milked, and I'll see you in the next video in 2026.